Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Today, we're going to be talking about what to do when you get stuck in your default thinking. Now, every time I sit down to record, there's always a question in my mind. What am I going to talk about today? Because sometimes I know in advance, I've thought about it, I've saved notes on my phone, I'm like ready to go. And sometimes it's a little bit more fresh in the moment. It just kind of depends. But this realization and this topic just came to me today. And thankfully, I have the time to sit down and record and share it with you. And so that's what we're doing today. If you listened to last week's episode, you know that I shared a recent medical experience where I had an IUD perforate my uterus. Thank you, world. Thank you, universe. And ended up needing emergency surgery. So I am now 8 days post-op. Thankfully, I feel so much better. I'm feeling so much more like myself. But part of that is related to what we're going to talk about today because my week was challenging. Now, let me share with you. So I had surgery on a Thursday. I already had the Friday off. I didn't have any assigned duties for that day. So I was able to rest Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I am an independent contractor in the private practice where I see patients for medical care. So I don't have sick leave, but I also don't have people breathing down my neck. If I need to cancel patients, I will cancel patients. But I was feeling pretty good through the weekend, tired, a little achy, but really not bad. I never had to take anything stronger than ibuprofen, thankfully. So it's just remarkable to me, but that was my experience. And so I went to work on Monday, which is my long clinical day. And I'm not going to lie, it was challenging. I wasn't really having pain, but I was just slow. I was tired. It just kind of felt just a little dumb. I don't think I made any poor decisions, but I was just glad that it wasn't a day where I was presented any real cognitive challenges because I'm not sure that I would have been in the best shape for that. But later that night, I started having cramping again, and it was one-sided, and I immediately freaked out and started getting worried. Uh-oh, what's going on with this IUD? Because I did have another IUD put in. And long story short, I ended up needing to have an urgent ultrasound. Thankfully, everything was fine, but there was a weird read on it. I was super anxious. I had to contact the on-call doctor. Like, it was a big swirl of things. And I ended up calling out for Tuesday afternoon when I was supposed to be in clinic. And I just really felt down, worried, anxious, mad, frustrated, just a whole lot of swirl of emotions. And I recognize now that I had slipped back into victim mode thinking. I had slipped back into a lot of anger. I was specifically also really mad that that I don't have sick leave, that I was losing income in choosing to take care of myself. And it just really set off this cascade of thoughts that I don't typically have anymore. This old patterns of thinking. And what was coming around and coming through it is I really recognized these old parts of myself that really rely on being in victim mode, being in self-pity mode, starting to blame others, using that as an excuse. And I don't do that anymore. And the reason I'm saying it that way is that the ways that I have practiced changing my thoughts, I don't choose to live there anymore. Now, our default patterns of thinking, whatever that is for you, don't magically go away. We don't just poof, they're never there anymore. They can come back even when we have gotten really good about thinking new thoughts, changing our thought patterns, having a different mindset than we have had before. And this is what people who have experienced coaching will often recognize. But the old thought patterns don't fully go away, and they can pop up again when we face situations that trigger some memories of things that we've experienced before. If you want to call, some of those, of course, will be traumatic, and some of them will maybe not sort of certainly not rise to the level of big T trauma, but might be little T trauma. But also, we may just under stress fall back into these default ways of thinking. And as I look back on the week and how the rest of the week progressed, I just recognized that I was giving up who I am now to be a little bit stuck in that mode because I felt tired and angry and worried. Now, ultimately, I am fine. Thankfully, I feel like my energy is coming back, but in part that's because I decided to get back and exercise again, which thankfully went well. And I took it slow and I'm working my way back up. But I recognized that there was this very strong part of me that was holding on to this victim mode. And it's not to say that what happened isn't important, it wasn't significant. It's not to dismiss the event that happened, but really the person that I am now, the way that I choose to think, the way that I choose to exist in the world doesn't sit in victim mode, doesn't sit in shame and blame, doesn't just choose to give away her power and be sort of at the victim of, whatever circumstances are coming up. Now, that doesn't mean don't have feelings. That doesn't mean don't experience challenges. That doesn't mean any of those things. It's not a Pollyanna-ish phenomenon where, oh, magically everything is just fine and I deserve this. I needed this as a lesson. I don't have to go to that place. But that's very different from feeling like I am at the whim, at the victimhood of my circumstances, which again is something I felt very stuck in for a very long period of time. So if that makes sense to you, if you have felt yourself struggling and trying to figure out, oh gosh, I thought that had gone away, and we have these glimmers of this default thinking coming back, I just want you to recognize that that's normal. It's not a reason to freak out or be upset. It's just the way that our brains work. And we're going to talk a little bit today about ways that we can process what's going on and decide to move through it rather than get stuck, get pulled back. So let's dive in. So, number one, when you are in a situation that is triggering in some way default patterns of thought, and especially default patterns of thought that you don't want to be a part of your life. This could be, being in a really sarcastic, negative, cynical mode. It could be victim mode. It could be this place of pity, shame, blame, anger. Whatever that looks like, the first thing is that we need to notice that it's happening, and we need to notice it without judgment or blame to ourselves, but just to acknowledge, oh, there are those thoughts again. I notice that my brain is telling me I should feel really angry here. My brain is telling me that I don't have any power in this situation. My brain is making me believe XYZ, which is a really old pattern of mine. Huh. Okay. Now, that sounds a little bit silly, but when we are working on changing the way that we think, so that we can change the way that we feel, we're going to need to dig into what are those thoughts that are sort of popping up by default. We're going to need to recognize what those sort of unfiltered thoughts are and be able to practice new thoughts or to recognize, sort of what's going on. So the very first step is just to notice, oh, yeah, I feel like I've been here before. I think what really stood out to me in this time period was just noticing how tired and drained I felt and how that was calling me back to various periods of burnout that I've experienced before. Now, this circumstance, right, where I, pretty recently had surgery and anesthesia and, things happened to my body was very different from what I was experiencing during times of burnout before. During times of burnout before, at various times I had really, really young children and was breastfeeding and pumping and, up all night and doing all that stuff. I was also delivering babies and being in a very busy HMO based practice. I was teaching residents. I was running around scrambling, never being any place, at the right time, right? Just everything was chaotic. And I felt so tired, so drained, like I didn't have choice or agency to be able to pick any of the things I was doing. I was just constantly moving from one place to another, trying to respond and react to whatever was going on. So that feeling of being really tired and really overwhelmed came back to me this week. And that's when I was able to recognize, oh, yes, I'm sort of feeling like I have no choice or agency here. I'm sort of feeling like I have no ability to walk my way through this experience that I've had, feeling like a victim, that that I had no agency, right? So we have to notice, and sometimes we will notice the thoughts first, but I think more often we might notice the emotion, right? That feeling of really being really tired and drained, and just like I couldn't cope, that harkened back to these periods of burnout. And that's what allowed me to really identify those thought patterns. So it might be the thoughts, it might be the emotions, or it might actually be, kind of the actions, right? The things that you're doing or not doing that notice. Though I definitely was having more sugar this week, and I was definitely having that sugar primarily when the kids were up in bed. Which I'm not going to say I never do that anymore, but I recognize that that is a patterned response to the feeling of tired and overwhelmed. And again, it's just another opportunity to be like, okay, what's going on here? So, multiple different things that we might pay attention to and notice that we've slipped back into some default experiences. Number 2 is to be able to look at that default and to be able to see where your current self is, otherwise sort of in place. So, seeing the discrepancy. When I noticed that I was feeling really tired and just kind of this depleted, overwhelmed feeling, I could recognize I really don't feel like myself, because myself in current present day Megan life, here in March of 2025, as I'm recording this episode, doesn't live in a place of feeling tired, burned out, drained, overwhelmed. I'm not going to say that I don't experience those things, but I don't live there anymore. And being able to notice the discrepancy of, okay, here's some default thoughts coming back. Here's some default, kind of emotions and feeling like really stuck in these feelings. But that's not where I live anymore. I am much better able to just recognize the thoughts and to be able to, with kindness and self compassion, be able to say, yeah, if you're feeling tired today, that makes sense because X, Y, and Z. And it's okay because, you have the ability to ramp up and ramp down an activity. You have the ability to make some decisions and be able to respond to the energy that you do or don't have. That is a very different place that I live now compared to when I felt really stuck before. So being able to really honor this discrepancy between where we are living and this default sort of pattern coming back, right? This is really important because the progress that I've made in being able to live my life quite differently has not been lost. It has not been lost. And I can tell you that today, I feel much more like myself. And in part, it's because I made some decisions to get out of that default mode when it had come back, because I was able to notice this doesn't feel like me. This isn't who I am anymore. And I can look back without shame and blame on those prior versions of myself. And I could say, yep, she felt that way. She felt like she had no choices. She felt like she had no agency. She didn't know exactly what to do and how to manage that. I wish that things could have been different, but that's what I experienced. And I can look back with self-compassion and be like, yes, she lived through a really hard time. And thank goodness she was able to make some changes, because now I feel so differently than what I felt before. I feel so much more in control and so much more agency in my life to be able to make decisions that are right for me than that version of me that lived before. So being really mindful of that discrepancy, of that change. We've talked about the book, The Gap versus the Gain, right? This is noticing the gains that have been made and being able to see, yes, this default way of thinking was what's going on back here. And that was an all the time thing. And yes, those thoughts and feelings have returned, but I don't live there anymore. So I can just notice them. I can notice them and I can look back and see, look how far I've come, that I don't live there anymore. This sounds a little woo as I'm saying it. It sounds like, oh God, this is too, I don't know, this is too silly to like sit down and actually think through. But being able to do this is part of the way that we succeed in the journey of becoming the next versions of ourselves. If you are someone who is listening, right? If you are a woman physician, or, or whoever you are doing whatever work you do, and you are working on making progress from being somebody who gets stuck in burnout and feeling like you have no choice and agency, and being able to move through these emotions and being able to process your thoughts differently on the way to the next version of you that is doing whatever it is that you plan to do, whether that's in medicine or something outside of medicine, whether that's in your current relationship or beyond, right? Whatever those changes are, being able to progress in the patterns of thinking that you have so that you can have a different lived experience is part of this work. It's just part of the work. We think that if I just change my circumstance, right? If we just change the job, the relationship, whatever the stressors are, that magically things will be different. But we're so used to thinking certain thoughts that if we don't start to change the thoughts, if we don't gain awareness of what those thoughts are and how they're contributing to how we feel, we will not actually feel different. We will feel the same. I share this with people frequently, and I'll share it with you here. We have this sensation sometimes as physicians, we think, God, if I could only leave medicine and go become a barista or go work, on a beach somewhere, I'll feel better. If I could just stay home with my kids, I'll feel better. And it's certainly possible, right, for someone to do that. But if you go from your current job as a physician or whatever it is that you do, and you keep the same thoughts about what you owe other people, that you always have to make people happy, that you always have to overwork, that you always have to smile, whatever those thoughts are, if you keep those thoughts and you go be a barista or you work on a beach or you stay home with your kids, you will continue to have the same emotional experience. It will just be in a different place. It is so important that we recognize that. And that is a little tangent side note, but it's really, really critical that we understand this, because if we do not change the ways that we think, we will not change the ways that we feel. Now, people often will, kind of raise their hands and get upset. Well, what about if you're being abused in a workplace? What if you're in a really toxic place? What if your boss and your manager hate you and they're constant? I'm not digging into that when I'm talking about this, although I will say that ultimately the same things will apply. Now, when we do this work, when we change our thoughts in order to change our emotions, that's not to say that we might never change our circumstance. We might decide, you know what? I'm going to leave this job. You know what? I'm going to leave this relationship. You know what? I'm going to leave medicine, right? We might change the circumstance, but we have already been doing the work on our thoughts and feelings so that whatever we're going to, whatever new thing we are going to be encountering, we are going to be in a better place. Now, I am not advocating for people staying in toxic job situations or relationships. We don't have to gaslight ourselves into thinking that, oh, I just have to change the way that I think and just continue to suffer the abuse. That is not what I'm saying. Please hear me. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that regardless of those circumstances, we will need to practice new ways of thinking to have a different experience. Okay? All right. Whew, tangent aside. The third element that's really important here in letting go of these default ways of thinking is that we need to be kind to ourselves as we let those thoughts go. So when I recognize, oh, I'm feeling like I don't have choice or agency or power here. I'm feeling like a victim. I'm feeling like, that things are not fair and, I just want to have a pity party. When I recognize those thoughts and the emotions that they create, I just need to look and say, oh, yes, Megan, this is stuff that you've thought before. This is an old patterned way of thinking. We don't do that anymore, so let's let it go. Instead of, let's contrast that with blaming myself, beating myself. I can't believe you're thinking that again, Megan. I can't believe you are back in this place. What is wrong with you? Right? That negative pattern of thinking that we are so good at, unfortunately, in medicine, right? We have internalized the angry old men yelling at us. We have internalized that voice and we can do it to ourselves, which is one reason why we stay stuck, right? We no longer need the actual, fence around us. We have fenced ourselves in. We need to let go of that angry old man voice in our head. I'm gendering that voice right now. It may not be an old man voice, right? But I'm talking about whatever angry, critical voice. You can give it a name. One of my friends calls it Judgy McJudgerson, which you're welcome to borrow, right? When that judgy voice comes in, we are not going to make good progress because it turns out that negativity and judgment actually don't lead to effective change, right? If I want to be letting go of these old patterns of thinking, I am much better able to do that when I can kindly recognize, oh, nothing has gone wrong here. It's just that this event triggered those thoughts again. And we're going to let them go because this is not who I am anymore. This is not who I am anymore. And it's okay that those old voices came back. It's okay that those old thoughts came back. Nothing has gone wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. But you aren't this person anymore. Right? I chose to leave the big box medicine that I was doing. I ultimately chose to be an independent contractor, right, who works in this small private practice and has a lot of autonomy and agency over how I spend my days. In choosing that, I chose not to have a bucket of PTO, right? And there are pluses and minuses to that. And I would not give that up, even though it meant that it was making it a little bit more complicated in my brain to decide to take some time off and then not get upset about it. Nothing has gone wrong here. And I can look at myself with so much kindness and just be like, yeah, I recognize like all of that was bringing up some thoughts and feelings. All of that was, sort of leading to me to believe that the universe owed me, not to lose income for the few days that I took. All of that makes total sense. And this version of me, this version of me that chooses to have this level of autonomy, that chooses to have this level of agency and control in my life, can completely accept that when she is not in clinic, she does not have PTO, she doesn't get sick leave, and also she is responsible for, without guilt or any pressure, for deciding what she can and can't do. I love that. And if that comes without PTO and whatever, that's fine. People who, take a big leap and open up their own practices, right? Same challenges. They are going to get sick at times. They are going to have vacations. They are going to go to conferences. They have the challenge of needing to decide for themselves what time off looks like and what they will and won't do. Nothing has gone wrong. But, we can see how these patterns of thought lead us to think that something is terrible, that, oh, it's really bad if I take some time off for vacation. Oh, it's really bad if I take some time off for CME because someone else is going to be burdened. These patterns of thinking are just normal. They are part of our lived experiences, and we can recognize them. We can see that they're not fitting with the current life that we are building for ourselves or the direction that we are trying to go. We can be kind to ourselves and just let it drop. I notice that I have these thoughts. It's okay. I thought these things for a really long time. Nothing has gone wrong. And now I'm going to move on. We're all on a journey. And the place that you are now, no matter where you are, no matter what struggles you face, you are further along on your journey than you were last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You have grown and learned and experienced new challenges, and you are changing all the time, as am I. When we choose to use these tools and be able to track the ways that we are thinking and feeling, not in a like an app, but just in a sense of maintaining awareness of our thoughts, our beliefs, our mindsets, the emotions that we're experiencing so that we can better move through them. We are much more on a journey to new versions of ourselves that I would advocate that we all want. Regardless of what we choose to do with our careers, when we are building intentional new ways of thinking that create new, hopefully more empowered ways of feeling, and subsequently allows us to take the action that we want to take to become the next version of ourselves, right? When we are intentionally moving through that process, we are growing and gaining all the time. There is so much power and strength. And when I look at the women physicians who are doing the things that I want to do, they are leaders in various parts of medicine. They are amazing physician coaches, right? There are lots of people out there who are doing incredible things, and they have decided that when they face challenges, they are navigating them in a certain way. Does that mean they don't have feelings? No, it doesn't. Does it mean they don't have challenges? No, it doesn't. Does it mean they don't get sick or hurt or injured? No, it doesn't. It means that they have made some different decisions from what has happened in the past. And when you hear people's stories, when you hear the challenges that they've navigated, and you see this person that they are today who looks like they've just got it all made and so easy, I want you to know that there are stories behind that, right? And there are challenges they've navigated that you will probably never hear about. Although sometimes we come and share stories, right? Don't look at someone you admire and think that they're not a person who's experienced challenges. I promise you they have, and they have made some powerful decisions. As I was thinking about today and sort of thinking about what I would talk about and thinking about my experiences this week, it really sort of came to the top of my mind that the people who were in my life when I was young, they were not doing this work. They were often stuck in victim mode. They were not feeling empowered. They were often making choices that were worse and worse for their health. They were seeing healthy choices typically as punishment. I'll just mention, kind of this diet mentality and this, I'm either exercising, to change the way that I feel or in the way that I look, or I'm not exercising and I'm completely, the opposite direction. There was so much lack of agency in the people in my life that I saw growing up that when I look at that and I see where I am and where I am in my own journey, I'm like, wow, I really have stepped out of bounds in terms of what I saw. And many of us will face similar challenges of really stepping away from what we saw growing up, what we've seen our parents struggle with, what we have experienced as kind of the default mode of like, well, that's just life and that's how it is. It's really remarkable that we can choose to decide, I'm choosing something different, choosing something different for myself. And do we have complete control over every circumstance? No, of course we don't. But do we have the ability to decide, I want something different for my life, and to be able to go after making the changes necessary to change the way that we experience life? This is powerful stuff, friends. And I want you to spend even just a little bit of time reflecting on how far you've come from even a year ago, 5 years ago. And you can spend some time thinking back. What was my default thinking? How am I making progress? If you feel like you're very stuck right now and you feel like things have just gotten worse and worse, it's time to decide, I'm going to do something different from here. I'm going to take back control and agency, and I'm going to work on changing the way that I think. Now, I've got lots of episodes that talk about this work, and you can go back and binge and listen to a lot. But better yet, reach out to me, set up a time for us to talk, and let's work together. This is work that I have done as I have just laid out, and it's work that I continue to do on myself. But I have also helped hundreds of physicians to be able to change the way that they think. This is something that means so much to me, to get us unstuck from these old crusty patterns of thinking and feeling, right, that have us feeling depleted and burned out and exhausted. It may shake some things up in your life. That's okay. But we don't start by just quitting. We don't start by just jumping into a new thing, a new job, changing the circumstances, moving country. We need to be able to change the way that we think. And this is the work that I can help you with. My friends, I ask you Come and work with me, and let's change your life together. All right, my friends, that is what I have for you for this week. This is an episode that you may want to go listen to a few times. Let it really sink in. Do the work. Sit down. Think about your own experience, and then reach out and let's talk. Happy to hear from you at any time. All right, until next week, take care. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.